From the farthest reaches of outer space to the freezing tundra of the Antarctic, the Alien series has gone to some truly wild places. But if you're having trouble keeping track of all the xenomorphs, synthetics, and engineers, let this be your guide. The Alien franchise doesn't typically take place in the present, or even on Earth. Instead, the original Alien takes place in the year 2122. The crew members of the USCSS Nostromo live in a universe where the Earth is dying due to human interference, hence the Weyland-Yutani Corporation's desire to build better worlds. The sequel, Aliens, is set over 50 years later in 2179 after Ellen Ripley wakes up from her accidentally extended cryosleep. The third in the series, Alien 3, is set almost immediately afterward. After that, the timeline begins to get a bit tricky. The next installment of the original anthology, Alien Resurrection, stars a half-alien clone of Ripley and takes place in 2381, over 200 years after Alien 3. That's where the timeline ends, at least for now. From there, Ridley Scott's controversial prequel films, Prometheus and Alien Covenant, take place primarily in the years 2093 and 2104 respectively, just a few decades before the original Alien. Between the original series and its prequels, 2 crossover films were released that blended Aliens with the Predator movies. AVP, Alien vs. Predator, was released in 2004 and takes place that same year. Its follow-up, 2007's Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, takes place immediately after the first AVP. Needless to say, the Alien timeline is all over the place. Throughout the Alien franchise, we see a handful of different extraterrestrial creatures. From the original eggs and their face-hugging offspring, to the chest-bursters that grow into full-on xenomorphs, the life cycle of an alien is a fascinating thing. As it turns out though, there are plenty of other alien variants out there. Some of them are even deadlier than the classic version from 1979, even if the first Alien is the most iconic.
You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? Perfect organism.
Everyone who's seen Aliens knows and loves the Xenomorph Queen, but there are even more variations than that. In Alien 3, a facehugger uses a dog or an ox as a host, resulting in a 4-legged xenomorph called a runner. This creature is understandably a bit more primal than the traditional 2-legged xenomorph. As a result, it hunts down the prisoners of Fiorina 161 before Ripley and her new companions are able to take it out. This becomes a recurring trend throughout the Alien sequels, as new variants of the iconic Xenomorph begin to develop. By the time Alien Covenant rolls around, it's explained that many of these variations are due to genetic manipulation by the android David, who may be the one responsible for creating the aliens in the first place. By mixing a black liquid mutagen with different hosts and gene pools, David creates the genetic template for what would become known as the Xenomorph. From there, the Alien franchise is born, and the horror continues. In the first Alien, Nostromo crew member Kane is infected by a facehugger while exploring a downed spacecraft on the moon of LV-426. Immediately following his exposure, he's taken back aboard the Nostromo, ignoring Ripley's very logical quarantine protocols, and operated on by the android Ash. Eventually, the facehugger detaches itself and dies, and Kane wakes up, seemingly back to normal. Except nothing would ever be normal again. In a shocking moment that audience members in 1979 certainly didn't see coming, the chestburster brutally tears its way out of Kane's ribcage. The tiny alien gets away, and it only takes a few hours before it's a full-fledged xenomorph. But how does it grow up so fast? The exact lifespan and life cycle of the titular alien creatures is something of a mystery. What we do know is that immediately upon the chestburster's birth, it hides in a dark and isolated area to undergo its metamorphosis.
Does it grow? Yeah. Very rapidly.
By the time the creature is next seen on the Nostromo, its transformation is complete. The adult-sized alien drone is now smarter, scarier, and far deadlier. If the Xenomorph is anything like life on Earth, then its quick evolution might be the catalyst for its murderous rampage. After all, such a fast transformation would require a whole lot of calories. Extraterrestrials aren't the only sci-fi beings to regularly show up in the Alien movies. No matter the installment, aside from the Alien vs. Predator spin-offs, a synthetic android manages to rear its human-like head and cause some commotion. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but more often than not, they're integral to the plot and have some sort of hidden agenda. In the original Alien, the android Ash is an A2 model synthetic pretending to be human, and he's programmed to capture the Xenomorph alive, even if that means killing his crewmates. Future sequels include a variety of synthetics with different capabilities. Bishop is heroic, Call is more emotionally advanced, and David does all sorts of fantastical things. Ash, on the other hand, didn't have much of a personality, or any personal investment beyond his orders from Weyland-Yutani. More than that, Ash was also defective. Like the other synthetics in his batch, he was prone to malfunction.
Was it an older model?
Yeah, the Hyperdyne system's 128.2.
Well, that explains it, and the U2s always were a bit twitchy.
Evidently, the bugs in Ash's model were dealt with in future models. Thankfully for Ripley, Bishop reveals that the synthetics made after the A2s have been fitted with behavioral inhibitor chips, meaning that they probably won't try to kill you with the magazine. Aliens didn't just add more xenomorphs to the mix. It also introduced audiences to the rough and rowdy crew of the USS Sulaco. One of the most beloved members of this crew is the android Bishop, who's played by the legendary actor Lance Henriksen. Despite Ripley's unfortunate experiences with the synthetic on the Nostromo, Bishop proves himself to be nothing short of heroic throughout the film. If it wasn't for him, then Ripley, Corporal Hicks, and Newt almost definitely wouldn't have made it out alive. This doesn't last, as Hicks and Newt are killed off in the opening minutes of Alien 3. Bishop survives to help Ripley one final time before being deactivated for good, but another Bishop soon takes his place. This version, designated Bishop 2 in the credits, isn't the heroic android from Aliens. He's here to capture Ripley and her alien spawn.
The company sent me here to show you a friendly face, to demonstrate how important you are to us. To me.
To this day, it's unclear if this Bishop is actually human or yet another android. Henriksen told IGN they were leaving that open because they weren't sure what they were going to do with me. But what I saw was that it was a more advanced model, certainly. That's not the only Bishop duplicate out there, though. In the original AVP, Alien vs. Predator, Henriksen returns as a human being named Charles Bishop Wayland, one of the original founders of Weyland-Yutani back in the 21st century. There's no ambiguity here, though. We can see quite clearly that this Bishop is made of flesh and blood when he's brutalized by a predator. Apparently, Bishops can never seem to catch a break. For decades, fans have debated over which Alien movie is the greatest. Is it Ridley Scott's original, or is it James Cameron's sequel? While we couldn't possibly answer that impossible question, it's clear that David Fincher's Alien 3 is not the franchise's best. Even though Ripley, Hicks, Newt, and Bishop all survived the brutal invasion at the end of Aliens, their victory is short-lived as their vessel crashes into the prison world of Fiorina 161 in the third film's opening. This course correction is caused by a facehugger, which reportedly melted some of the ship's primary systems. Hicks and Newt are killed in the wreck, and Bishop is left beyond repair, leaving Ripley to fight off a new xenomorph without her companions.
Ripley.
Hi, Bishop. How you feeling?
My legs hurt.
While she makes some new allies on Fiorina 161, none are as meaningful to her as Hicks and Newt, leaving Ripley broken over the loss of her surrogate family. If you hate the ending to Hicks' story as much as everyone else, there are a few unproduced drafts of Alien 3 out there that keep Newt, Hicks, and Bishop in the picture. The 2013 video game Aliens Colonial Marines even introduces a parallel history in which Hicks is saved before his death. It's explained that the body of the soldier who died in the threequel belonged to a different Marine who was forcibly inserted into his pod after Hicks was awakened. While the canonicity and quality of the Colonial Marines is debatable, it certainly gives Hicks a more heroic send-off. On the subject of the controversial Alien 3, one of the most confusing moments is the introduction of the alien egg that ends up on board the USS Sulaco. Of course, we all know that the facehugger that hatched from this egg is responsible for the deaths of Newt and Hicks. But how did it manage to climb aboard the spacecraft in the first place? While there isn't a direct answer to this question in Aliens or Alien 3, there are a few theories that might shed some light on this apparent plot hole. The first is that the alien queen may have implanted an egg in the ship before being launched out of the airlock. But this seems a bit far-fetched given that the queen's egg sac was destroyed by Ripley. Even if the queen had laid an egg within the landing gear of the shuttle before revealing itself, it still doesn't explain how the egg got further inside the Sulaco, or anywhere near the cryosleep pods that house the 3 survivors. Another possible explanation comes from Aliens Colonial Marines, which explains that another ship sent by Weyland-Yutani intercepted the Sulaco while Ripley and her friends were in cryosleep. It's then that the Weyland-Yutani crew let in a facehugger from their own craft, where they'd been experimenting on xenomorphs, which leads directly into the events of Alien 3. One of the most hated films in the Alien chronology, Alien Resurrection, takes the Ripley saga a step further with cloning technology. Genetic experiments result in the creation of Ripley 8, a clone of the original protagonist who died over 200 years earlier. And she's a bit more alien than she might care to admit. Throughout the film, Ripley 8 is shown to be more aggressive, sarcastic, and considerably stronger than the original star of the franchise.
You're programmed to be an ass. You're the new ass model they're putting out? Come on.
It may seem like the new Ripley's updated personality came out of nowhere, but there's actually a good reason for that. Ripley 8, as her name suggests, is not the first clone of Ripley to be developed, but she was the most successful. Following Weyland-Yutani's shutdown, Ripley's genetic samples from the Fiorina 161 prison were collected by the United Systems military, which produced 7 defective Ripley hybrid clones before finding success the 8th time around. Due to the change in the original Ripley's DNA during the events of Alien 3, which include a new queen growing inside of her, Ripley 8 was grown from a different genetic template that includes xenomorph DNA. As a result, Ripley 8 received alien attributes as well as human ones, including more aggressive tendencies and superior physical strength. In Alien Resurrection, the Ripley clones are created for one specific purpose: to finally create a perfect alien queen. This would provide the United Systems military with the genetic material necessary to breed xenomorphs built for war. While this doesn't go as planned for the crew of the USM Auriga, which is completely wiped out by the film's end, the program itself succeeds in producing the first living alien-human hybrids. Ripley 8 is counted among them, given her shared alien DNA and connection to the hive mind, as well as the cloned alien queen itself. By the end of the film, the queen even births a creature called a newborn that has some human features. A perfect alien-human hybrid, the newborn kills its alien mother before bonding with Ripley 8 in one of the strangest scenes in the history of the franchise. As it turns out, the newborn sees the cloned Ripley as its true mother due to their shared DNA, so it kills the queen to protect her. Sadly, the newborn quickly proves itself a threat to humanity and synthetics alike, just like its other alien siblings. In the climax of Resurrection, Ripley 8 is forced to kill it the way she knows best, by ejecting it out into deep space. All she can do is shed a tear for the tortured creature, which is admittedly more than any of us can do. Even more tragic than that though, this is the last we ever see of Ripley. After Alien Resurrection, the Alien franchise shifted into its Alien vs. Predator phase, with plans for a fifth film falling through. That is, until Scott returned with his 2012 prequel, Prometheus. This was the first of two Scott-helmed prequel pictures that take place decades before the events of his original Alien. Despite the obvious connections though, Prometheus doesn't exactly commit to being a prequel. Instead, it features some inconsistencies that have made some fans theorize that it might be a sort of prequel reboot hybrid instead, not unlike the recent Planet of the Apes trilogy. The world visited in Alien and Aliens is designated LV-426 and features the derelict spacecraft that houses the alien eggs, but Prometheus takes place on a more breathable world called LV-223. Likewise, the downed craft seen in Prometheus doesn't house any eggs, just plenty of black goo. Another change can be seen in the differences between the so-called space jockey in Alien and the dead engineer in Prometheus. There are even moments in Alien Covenant that seem to contradict Cameron's Aliens, including the idea that massive hordes of xenomorphs could be created without a queen. Plus, the technology of the prequel films seems much more advanced compared to the retro-futuristic aesthetic of the originals. One of the biggest mysteries in the Alien franchise comes from Prometheus, which follows a group of explorers as they search for the origins of life in the universe. During their mission, crew member Meredith Vickers is revealed to be the daughter of Weyland-Yutani founder Peter Weyland. Of course, given her often cold and logical nature, the question of her humanity has been asked time and time again, including in the film itself.
I was wondering, are you a robot?
It's definitely a possibility. Vickers never bleeds during the film, and since she's crushed by the engineer's juggernaut craft, we never learn whether her blood runs red or white. Vickers also doesn't seem to care much when her father is killed, and the synthetic David refers to the elderly billionaire as his father as well. While the film leaves this question unresolved, screenwriter Damon Lindelof was pretty clear when he stated that Vickers is made of flesh and bone. Despite having a daughter of his own, Peter Weyland made David to be the son that he never had. Lindelof joked to MTV, "What better way to piss off your daughter than to build the male equivalent of her?" Prometheus reveals a pretty intense truth to its characters. All known life in the universe, including humanity, was created by an alien race called the Engineers. The film dives into the philosophical implications of such a discovery as the Prometheus crew follows the ancient star map that leads them to LV-223.
So you're saying we're here because of a map you two kids found in a cave, is that right?
No.
Yeah.
On this moon, the crew learns that the Engineers, or at least the one they've encountered, hope to wipe out humanity by releasing their powerful black goo upon the planet. Thankfully, Elizabeth Shaw and her companions are able to prevent the apocalypse, but not without casualties. As for why the Engineers turned on their creation, the truth is that we don't know. It's possible that they were frustrated with the constant war and violence among humans, or maybe they wanted to use the black goo to make a new world by starting everything over again. Either way, Prometheus never explains their frustrations, and its sequel Alien Covenant doesn't do this plotline any favors either. We also don't learn how the Engineers' civilization fell before the events of Prometheus. Ruins and an abandoned facility are clearly shown, but we don't know much more than that. While we've never gotten a direct answer in the films, and likely never will, Alien Covenant raises the possibility that the Engineers in LV-223 were destroyed by their own creations. At the end of Prometheus, David and Shaw embark on a new journey to take the fight to the Engineers and discover why they want to wipe out humanity. With a hopeful ending, it seemed like these two companions could headline an entire trilogy themselves, starting a new saga in the Alien universe. When Scott's follow-up Alien Covenant was released though, all those hopes and dreams died. When we catch up with David, he explains that Shaw died years prior. What he fails to mention is that he killed the entire engineer population on Planet 4, which Shaw opposed, calling it genocide. Because she turned on him, David used Shaw as an incubator for his biological experiments both before and after she died. Ultimately, he created a proto-xenomorph that serves as the ultimate terror of the film. While we don't see much of Shaw in Covenant, Scott's short film The Crossing takes place in the time between prequels, explaining how Shaw cared for David and rebuilt his body before he betrayed her. Although Shaw never sees her mission realized, David's endgame is only beginning as the android strives to create the perfect monster. With more questions than answers, we can only hope to learn more in further installments.
What do you believe in, David?
Creation.
The overall Alien canon, like other big sci-fi franchises, is always up for debate. Even though AVP, Alien vs. Predator, and Aliens vs. Predator Requiem came out long before Scott's prequels, they were quickly retconned following the release of Prometheus. While mainline Predator installments like Predator 2 have referenced the Alien franchise, the world of the Xenomorphs rarely reciprocates. It's exciting to bring together these powerhouse franchises, but given the glaring plot holes, the AVP movies no longer fit into the Alien lore. One such plot hole is the revelation that the Xenomorphs have been on Earth for centuries and are locked in eternal combat with the Predators. Beyond that, AVP Weyland-Yutani co-founder Charles Bishop Weyland contradicts the reveal of Peter Weyland from Prometheus, as does the hyper-quick development of Xenomorphs from their human hosts to fully grown aliens in a matter of minutes. Regardless though, the Xenomorph Predator battle sequences are pretty spectacular. Ultimately, the best way to understand the AVP films is as their own separate continuity. While the events of AVP fit in nicely with the Predator franchise, they don't quite work in the expanded world of Alien.